This is Jordan Poyer, safety for the Buffalo Bills, and you are now listening to Cover One Buffalo Podcast. Let's go.
Good evening and welcome to the Cover One Buffalo Podcast. You are joining your host, Greg Tompsett, tonight in the fifth in our series on the 2020 Buffalo Bills NFL Draft Class. Tonight, it's a Kicker Palooza special. The kicker from Georgia Southern, Tyler Bass, and to dive into the intricacies of the kicking world, none other than expert Russell Brown. Russ, how we doing?
You know, as the guy with the longevity, the experience on the staff, I just want to know, how in the world did I get put on kicker assignments? I mean, I don't understand. I got to talk this up with my boss, but this is insane. But I mean, Tyler Bass, is he related to Ronnie Bass? I just want to know from Remember the Titans.
It enhanced the value. I think that it's going to make things better.
Got to call him Sunshine.
And, you know, I think that a lot of fans were a little crazy. I think that some people overdo it. And we talked about this in our series when we were going over Zach Moss and the idea of that you can get a running back anytime. I think people assume that every kicker or punter is an undrafted free agent and that many good kickers are drafted. Like, you know, now I think that it should always be day three. I think it should always be the tail end of day three. You know, I think sometimes people get a little crazy before that, but a sixth round pick is pretty rarely a impact player from a roster standpoint. And when you flip around who the Bills got after Tyler Bass, and that you're able to still add an Isaiah Hodgins, you're still able to add a Dane Jackson. I think it certainly makes you feel a little bit better that it was certainly worthwhile. But, you know, when pick 188 came up and it was a kicker that came aboard, I can't lie, I was a little surprised.
Yeah, I was too, man. I know there were some struggles this past year with Hauschka and just everything that was kind of going on, really the last 2 years. But yeah, I mean,
Henry Anderson's fault. Ever since that dirty cheap shot, his back's been messed up and he's never been the same. I'll never forgive him.
Yeah, no, and it's been kind of a struggle as far as the kicking game goes. And I mean, I don't want to say it, but as Bills fans know, in big games, if you don't have the kicker doing his job, then it might cost you something. So I think it's kind of important to kind of go down this avenue and take a look at a prospect that maybe you can develop into your future starting kicker. And who knows, maybe you get a Vinatieri out of it who is kicking you game-winning field goals in the AFC title game.
Yeah, and I think, you know, going into this, everyone had to be realistic that competition for Stephen Hauschka was necessary. Mm-hmm. You're talking about a guy who's turning 35, who's been materially lesser these last 2 years. And I was
much like myself.
You know, hey, we're all trying to be our best selves. You know, I was half joking about the Henry Anderson thing, but honestly, ever since then, it's been a material, noticeable difference. You're talking about a guy that in his first season at Buffalo, he broke the NFL record for consecutive 50-plus yard field goals, and that, you know, really endeared himself. He was house money. That's what everybody called him. It was just an automatic every single time. And, you know, now you're talking about 2 straight years in the 70% range from a field goal standpoint. That's just not good enough anymore. Mm-hmm. And I'm not a kicking expert by any means. I'm barely legible from a draft standpoint, period, on the positions that the Bills need. So I have no background on kickers other than one experience, and that I joined you guys down at the Senior Bowl and was, you know, in Mobile and checking out the practices, had an awesome time being able to kind of watch everything. And on one of the days when they were switching over to the, you know, field goal practice, it was Rodrigo Blankenship from Georgia. And it's obviously everybody watched the games. They saw the rec specs. They saw Hot Rod out there and that, you know, made some clutch kicks in some big games. And that, you know, at that point, people are joking about, you know, Sebastian Janikowski, and he's going to be a first and second round kicker. And, you know, I'm ready to watch him. And he's out there and it's a little windy and he's struggling. I think he goes like 3 of 8, puts a couple of them short. And, you know, misses wide left and right here and there, but it was 53-yard attempt. So, you know, it's understandable. It wasn't going to be great. Mm-hmm. And we're watching it with myself, Sal Capaccio, who covers everybody listening here knows him from WGR and from the news and the Sal Sports podcast, and Kevin Ferguson, who is Reed Ferguson's dad. And at the time, Blake Ferguson was there at the Senior Bowl, and he's a long snapping expert, obviously with 2 sons now in the NFL as long snappers. And he was watching the long snapper receiver that was competing with Blake there. And all of a sudden these kicks start hitting the bleachers. And I mean, we're talking 53-yard attempts and putting them into the bleachers. They would have been good from 60 and over and over and over again. And it's this little scrappy dude who's way smaller than everyone else on the field. And I was asking, who is this kid? And it's Tyler Bass from Georgia Southern. And I watch him go 7 of 8 from 53 yards. And like I said, all of them would have been good from 60, just crushing the ball. And lo and behold, 10 feet in front of us as we're doing that is Heath Farwell, the special teams coordinator for the Bills. And Kevin and I talked about it and said, man, to make that kind of impression in person while the special teams coordinator is sitting there scribbling notes feverishly, man, that's a good first impression from a job interview standpoint. And lo and behold, they pick him. So it's just funny. That's my only experience from a kicking standpoint. It happens to be a guy they end up picking here. So I've been a big advocate of it since then, just because the only thing I've ever seen him do is crush long field goals. So I'm assuming he's never going to miss ever again. But let us know a little bit about what you saw from the statistics and what he's done at Georgia Southern.
Yeah, so I pulled up his stats from SIS, and I do remember him from the Senior Bowl. I mean, I remember him just crushing the ball. And, through his time at SIS, or through his time at Georgia Southern and the stats that I have from SIS, he's 20 for 28 as far as field goals, but extra points go. I mean, he's pretty damn close to being automatic. And from 40 to 49 yards, he was 8 for 13. And then from 30 to 39 yards, he was 6 for 8. But I was a little surprised to see this. He was actually 0 for 1 from 50 yard or more. So that was just for this past year. I can't pull up for his career, but clearly he took a step back. If you look at that just overall field goal percentage for 2019, he missed 8 field goals compared to previous years, which was a little different. But I think obviously that performance at the Senior Bowl and people being able to see that was, hey, okay, we can take this guy, we can develop him. And I think that's the thing. You're getting coaching from Georgia Southern compared to the Buffalo Bills. I mean, you're getting an NFL special teams coordinator going to coach you, and special teams coaches taking a look at how you're driving into the football, how you're kicking it, how's it coming off your foot, and those types of things. Where's your toe pointed? Where's your foot pointed? And I'm no kicking specialist by any means. I don't watch him, so I don't know exactly what his form is like. But for them to draft him in the 6th round with the 9th pick, 69, then I think it's certainly something worth monitoring. And I think he can certainly come in and compete, and it wouldn't surprise me if we get into August, September, and he's the starting kicker.
I certainly think an investment from a draft pick standpoint matters. I think that's different than just a UDFA and somebody coming aboard. Last year, every single draft pick that the Bills made the roster, the opening day roster of the 53. I think Brandon Beane values his draft picks. I think that they showed his hand last year. They knew they had something in Chase McLaughlin, and they tried to carry both. They ended up having to juggle things around. They had to waive him. He got picked up initially by the Chargers, then got released, and they put in a waiver claim for him. And nobody ever disclosed who was going to be released, but from context that people had poked around, I think they were going to release Stephen Hauschka, and I think that they were going to bring back Chase McLaughlin. He ended up getting snagged by the Colts, and now has held on to that job, or maybe the other way around. Maybe it's the Colts, and now he held on with the Chargers, but now has that job full time. And I think they showed that, hey, it wasn't good enough, and you saw it in that playoff game against the Texans, that if they felt a little bit more confident in having that leg that Hauschka had 2, 3, 4 years ago, they probably make a field goal attempt in one of those spots late in the game, and that they're in a different scenario now. So I think, obviously a lot of Bills fans are seeing the viral videos going around from Tyler Bass, where he does this crazy no step 50-yarder where he has his left foot planted and simply swings around with his right foot, not stepping into it, and hits a 50-yarder, and then does a 1-step on a 60-yarder. So obviously you're talking about an incredible amount of power, especially for a guy who's like 5'8". Like he's not a big dude. He's shorter than me, and I'm not that big. Yeah. So not a huge guy, in that, able to just drive that kind of power. He's still got to do it when it matters. It's hard to replicate pressure situations at camp and preseason. But I think if he comes out, obviously my one experience was phenomenal, but if he comes out and is able to put on the show that he did in the Senior Bowl and what I saw in person, I think he is going to be the kicker for this team going forward. And I think that it's going to take a pretty significant collapse from him of just showing that he doesn't have the mental fortitude to be able to hold on to the pressure situation. But they brought him in here to take this job from Hauschka.
Yeah, and I think that's the key thing is, hopefully we can get football going and he can learn from Stephen Hauschka and he can get kind of the mindset of what you need to have when you're in those situations and just kind of learning. And I think it's something as we talk about with other guys like Jake Fromm and Isaiah Hodgins and even Zach Moss, just having some of these younger guys in the locker room learning certain things. I think with Tyler Bass, I know it's just a kicker, but like you mentioned, there's a lot of high pressure situations that he's going to have to replicate in practice, in a game, and he's going to have to come through in the clutch. And just because he was 0 for 1 from 50 yards or more this past season, that's not necessarily his fault. He's not the one getting the opportunity to go out there and kick the ball. So those viral videos, you definitely have to check them out on YouTube or find them on Twitter or maybe even on Instagram. But yeah, it's very it's entertaining to see, and it's impressive because to have that type of leg strength to just stand still and just kick the ball 50 yards. That's incredible. So, it's an interesting draft pick. I think I've talked about it before. If you can get some special teamers in the draft, especially on day 3, that just helps your team. That's a value. And this is a starting spot. You have to fill it one way or the other. You're not going to have Josh Allen out there kicking the ball, I don't think. So you got to have some value there. And I think Bass can bring that and hopefully it works out.
Well, and I think each time we've gone through these series, I've talked about the financial implications, the roster construction side of things, and that if you're able to add someone you can trust and you get them on a 4-year rookie deal, that's a significant savings. We're talking about $2-3 million a year for most kickers. High end are now getting $4 and $5 million, and some of the high end kickers.
What's Hauschka's deal? Do you know?
Right around $3 million, and they can get 2 and change back from that to be able to do. So there's some, it's not the reason that they're going to do it, but there's some material benefit. If Bass wins this job, they do get a material amount of money back that is able to help them out. So it certainly is something that would be a bonus if they're able to do that. And I think we're going to see two-headed competitions in both paths, that you're going to see Hauschka versus Tyler Bass. You're going to see Kari Vedvik versus Corey Bojorquez, and that Vedvik now, it's been reported, is solely focused on punting. I know he tried to do everything last year and, flamed out pretty strongly from a field goal kicking standpoint. But I think certainly has a lot of potential in what you saw, a rocket leg capability. So if he really focuses on solely punting, I think there's a potential there that we could have 2 new specialists for the Bills. And that, right now, if I had to call it, I think it's more likely that the Bills kicker is going to be Tyler Bass and the Bills punter is going to be Kari Vedvik. And that that is an interesting dynamic with how strong the rest of this roster is, that you could have 2 unproven rookie type guys in some pretty serious situations.
Well, and like you mentioned, with Tyler Bass, if you get rid of Hauschka, you can clear up $2 million and some change. You look at some of the deals that are out there for some of these, let's just pick a position, receiver, you get some veteran minimums on receivers. Devin Funchess went for practically nothing to Green Bay. Geronimo Allison went to Detroit for basically nothing. So you can get a depth receiver, a number 4, number 5 that has, production in years past. It's only going to benefit you down the line. Or even if you talk about the, running back position, if you're looking for maybe a little bit more of a pass catcher to be, that third down guy. So I think it helps you in the long run because it's going to open up a roster spot. It's going to free up some money and you can spend it elsewhere. And it doesn't have to just be offense. It could be anywhere. So as far as, Bass being like maybe a potential kickoff guy, that's a possibility too. He had 198 touchbacks on his 268 kickoffs. So in college, so he can do the kickoff duties. He's obviously going to be the field goal guy. So the place kicker. So I think it's, I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see what happens and how it boils down. But I think he, brings you something and probably a lot more is just from youth and overall leg strength compared to Hauschka.
Well, and I looked up the numbers here just to confirm. Obviously, you're not going to see a release prior to training camp, so it's not going to be a pre-June 1st release. So after June 1st, it's $2.4 million that they would save by releasing him, and you'd have a $600,000 dead cap hit, which is obviously very negligible. So $2.4 million does matter. That's a legitimate amount of money. So like I said, it doesn't mean it's automatic. I think that there's still a level of trust with Stephen Hauschka that Tyler Bass is going to have to overcome, that especially a guy like Sean McDermott, who believes in that kind of thing so strongly, and that Stephen Hauschka had been a special teams captain at one point. So someone who has some locker room cachet and has some trust in that locker room, Bass is going to have to show out and show that capability that he's had in these other workouts and to get himself drafted, but certainly has that potential. And I think it's an exciting opportunity to maybe have some new fresh blood there, and someone who, with the offense the Bills are trying to put together here, just that weapon that knowing as soon as you cross midfield, you've got a chance to score, and you don't have to get to the 30-yard line to feel good about it. And that's such a huge difference in that, anytime you get to the 40 or 45, you're in range to give it a shot. I think that changes Josh Allen's dynamic of what he's looking for. I think that changes what, you get into a 3rd and 12 at the 45-yard line. All of a sudden, that's a different kind of play than what it is if you have to punt if you don't complete it. And that, just being in that range to give that option is just another weapon to be able to take a look at and lets Brian Daboll and Josh Allen make different decisions with the ball. So I'm looking forward to having that. I hope that it's Bass, and I hope that this draft investment gives them that confidence to do it.
Yeah, for sure. I'm sorry. I'm just looking up, some free agents that are out there. Taylor Gabriel he got cut by the Bears, 29 years old. I don't know. Maybe that's somebody that you look at. I'm just looking at random names. Paul Richardson.
Oh, here, I'll give a number. If you take the cap savings from Trent Murphy, which is a little over 8 million, 8.05, and you take the cap savings from Stephen Hauschka, which is 2.4 million, that 10.5 million is probably Everson Griffin.
That's exactly the name I was looking at.
If you're going to be able to, play some money ball here and shuffle those things around, give me Trent Murphy's money and Stephen Hauschka's money and turn that into an Everson Griffin, and we're playing ball. So that's the kind of thing that hopefully this frees up to let them take a look at.
Yeah, and you get a guy like Griffin. I mean, I don't know if he necessarily played under Leslie Frazier in Minnesota.
He did. His first 4 years in Minnesota were Frazier's 4 years as head coach.
So it works out perfectly. Yeah, I mean, it works out perfectly, especially if you talk about maybe just a 1-year deal helps a guy like an AJ Epinesa. I think that's a home run right there. So that's something they should do. And I've been saying cut Trent Murphy for like 7 months now. So.
Well, there you go. We can now get the drum beat going. So thank you guys for checking this out. Obviously, this is the fifth in the series here. We've got one show for every draft pick that we're going through here. Appreciate all the time from Russ and all the time from Christian being able to go through each of these shows. Hope you guys are enjoying them, understand what we're doing here. Any final thoughts for the people on new Georgia Southern kicker for the Buffalo Bills, Tyler Bass?
I don't have pretty much of much. I mean, it's probably your future starting kicker. So, I appreciate everybody that's been reaching out as far as my draft guide that went. That was kind of a spur of the moment thing. I wasn't planning on doing that. So for everybody that checked that out, really appreciate it. And I kind of thinking of maybe doing something a little bigger and better next year. So especially with how this one kind of turned out, it was literally, it took me a week to input all the data and just format it. And then I just dropped it. So it kind of worked out. But yeah, so I appreciate everybody doing that. And, find me on Twitter at RussNFL Draft. Appreciate you bringing me on. You guys have been doing great with this Buffalo podcast. It's always great to listen to. It's something I listen to every time you drop a new episode. So smash the follow button, subscribe to the Cover One NFL Draft Show, and of course your show.
Appreciate it, man. Yeah, and I can't echo that enough. That the Cover One Draft Show is fantastic. You and Christian have a great dynamic together. It's a lot of fun, and this is the time of year where things kind of reset. So I hope and wish you guys a moment to relax and to be able to kind of get your minds right. But I know you well enough to know that you're ridiculous maniacs and already diving into the 2021 material. So make sure you guys are checking that out. Follow Russ NFL Draft. Check everything that's going on there. Appreciate your time tonight, Russ. This is Cover One Buffalo, and we are out.